tradition, we are taught that our true nature is infinite consciousness and joy. And yet, I think most of us will agree that our regular day to day experience doesn't reflect that. We don't realize or feel all the time that my true nature is infinite. I am of the nature of joy and love. No, we think I'm tired, I'm cranky, I'm angry, I'm hungry, or I am a man or I am a woman, I am fat, I am skinny, I have all these things. We identify with all these things that are have to do with our bodies and our personalities, our minds. So, how to shift our view, how to understand, how to realize who we really are. That's the term we like to use, realize, because it's not that we attain something, it's that we realize what we are. And we realize that the divine is behind everything. So, for that, spiritual practice is necessary to uh, clear, as it were, clear our vision and uh, purify our hearts so that we can experience our own divinity and the divinity behind everything. And that, so it's a lifelong work. And as we start, we begin, it's most difficult at the beginning. Not that it ever gets easy, but it's most difficult at the beginning because we don't yet have any, perhaps we don't yet have any real glimpse of it. We're just operating on a kind of conditional faith. So, well, the books say so, the teachers say so. All right, let me try. But as we start to practice sincerely, we start to get little glimpses. We start to feel a little peace, and we think, well, hey, I'm getting a little peace here. There's something to this. And I think all of you being practitioners and followers of uh, science of mind, what you call it, spiritual living, any spiritual living and all of that, you're practicing. So, this, you also, in your experience, it's true. You do some practice and you start to feel differently. We start to feel that, well, there's more to me than this body. There's something in me that doesn't change, that doesn't die. And so we go on. Now, if for some people that's enough, they think, okay, I feel a little bit of peace and a little bit of happiness thinking of God. And for some people, that's enough. But that's really, we haven't even hardly put our foot on the first step of the ladder. So there's a wonderful story given by our teacher, Sri Ramakrishna, who's the kind of one of the great teachers of our Vedanta tradition, who tells the story of a woodcutter who was carrying his heavy load of wood in the forest. And it's a hard work being a woodcutter. And one day he met a holy man walking along the forest paths who said, "Hey, my good man, go forward, go forward." So the woodcutter went on his journey to sell his wood in the marketplace, and he was pondering over the words of the holy man. And one day he decided, well, go forward. Maybe the holy man meant that I should go deeper into the forest. So he went deeper into the forest, and he came across a grove of sandalwood trees. Sandalwood is a very precious uh, wood. It's a very fragrant and beautiful and very valuable also. So he harvested some of those sandalwood trees and brought them to the market. And his financial difficulties were to a large extent solved. He had enough money to feed his family. He didn't have to work so hard. He found this grove of sandalwood trees. After some time, the woodcutter was reflecting, well, the holy man didn't tell me to stop at the grove of sandalwood trees. He told me to go forward. Let me see if I go even deeper into the forest, what I might find. So he goes deeper into the forest, and he stumbles across a mine. It's a mine of precious metals, a silver mine. And he finds the silver in this mine, and he's overjoyed, and he becomes very well-to-do. He becomes one of the wealthiest people of that village with the silver that he finds. And to make the story a little shorter, afterwards he decides to go still deeper into the forest. He finds a gold mine, and then he goes still further, and he finds a dime of precious gems. So spiritual life is one of continuous unfoldment, and we go deeper and deeper. And that's the call of Vedanta, is don't be satisfied with the little piece that you've got. There's your true nature is infinite peace. If you haven't felt that yet, go forward, taste it, go forward. So for that, rituals and practices are very helpful, and practices are a kind of ritual. A ritual is a kind of formalized expression of our philosophy, our beliefs, perhaps. And when it's a religious ritual, if we believe that the divine resides everywhere, then a ritual might be to um, offer flowers before to see that manifestation of divinity appearing before us physically. Or a ritual might be to uh, go to a sacred spot and sit down quietly and look out over a beautiful vista and try to see the divine shining behind the beautiful view we have. Or a ritual could be uh, so many, these kind of things.
Yeah, this kind of reminds me of, there's a very famous saying, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice.
Oh,
It's
right.
like, how do you get to self-realization? Practice, practice, practice,
Right, right.
I think many people think that when you become enlightened, it's like a lightning bolt hits you. But that very rarely is the case, right? Mostly it's you go in increments and increments and get deeper and deeper and learn more and get more, marinated in spirit until you really understand that that is what you are.
Yes, beautifully put, marinated. We have to marinate ourselves in spiritual ideas until they start becoming real for us. At first, they're completely imaginary. Then we start to get a deep conviction, and gradually becomes a part of our regular experience. Ramakrishna, that's a wonderful point about enlightenment. We think, well, it's dark in here, and enlightenment is like it's dark for 1,000 years, and then finally you find the light switch and you turn it on, and now I can see. It's not like it's on the one hand, it's like that in the sense that when we experience the divine, it's said that the ignorance of 1,000 years or 1,000 lifetimes is dispelled in a flash. It's not that it goes away little by little, but on the other hand, it's that we gain more and more understanding, more and more faith, more and more glimpses, and then we have to make those our own.
Yeah, Deepak Chopra once used the analogy of it's like we're in a museum, but the lights are out, and all we have is this little flashlight.
Hmm.
So we're poking around in the dark and getting glimpses of little things. But the more we practice, the bigger the light gets and gets
Nice.
and gets until we can really see the big picture and understand that we are in it.
Yes.
We are a part of it.
And something I've been thinking about lately is what one of Sri Ramakrishna's teachings was: what happens when you realize God? When do you grow a pair of horns? Do you suddenly become completely different? Do you become something strange that people would come to marvel at? No, you're actually still you. You just you have this direct experience of the divine. So that means that we should so live as if we see God shining in every heart. We
Right. Isn't
we
it the Buddhist that said, what do you do before enlightenment? Chop wood, carry water. What do
right,
you do after enlightenment? Chop wood, carry water.
right. The externals are don't necessarily change when our it's just our whole experience changes, our inner experience.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about some of the ways that we can incorporate spiritual practices into our day. So I know you as a monastic, you have, certain schedules for your spiritual practices. Let's hear what that's like.
My teacher Swami Swahananda used to say, bind yourself to a routine. Bind yourself to routine. For spiritual life, that's extremely helpful. And one reason is that the mind, it seems to have a mind of its own. It wants to, it doesn't want to be disciplined. It wants to run around and just have fun going wherever it wants to go. And yet that causes us a lot of misery. So it's a training of the mind. And if we stick to a routine, the mind gets used to it and it starts to cooperate with us. If we say, I'm only going to meditate when I feel like it, I feel like meditating now, so I'm going to meditate. There's nothing wrong with that. That's certainly good. But how often does the mind actually feel like meditating? Not too often. So if we when we get serious about spiritual life, as you know, we say, okay, every morning at 6 o'clock, I'm going to meditate, whether I feel like it or not. And the truth is that in the beginning, mostly we don't feel like it, but gradually we start to taste some of the joy, and we start to look forward to it. So really look forward to my morning meditation, and I wouldn't miss it for anything. I If for some reason I have to miss it, for say I'm haven't done that for a while, but going traveling somewhere and have to miss my morning meditation, I miss it. So uh, we bind ourselves to a routine, and of course, some of us have more free time than others. But however much free time we have, we can work a routine of spiritual life. Means a constant reminding ourselves. We can meditate early in the morning is such a wonderful time to meditate because our minds are fresh. We don't have all the rubbish of gossip and arguments and newspapers and all that.
So we
um,
should meditate before we look on Facebook.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Keep the mind, because it's amazing how those things come back. Something someone posts on Facebook disturbs us a little, and we feel like we're writing a response, and so we go to meditate, and we're composing the response
Yeah,
between
and then
a
we're
Facebook
thinking
post.
about that instead of
Yeah,
thinking about God, which is the
absolutely.
point. And
Yes,
also, I think it's important to note that when you guys sit down for your morning meditation, you don't just like plop down and all of a sudden it's silence. You say a prayer or sing a song, kind of set the tone. So tell us what that looks like.
right. Preparing the mind for meditation. That's important. Of course, everything we do prepares the mind for meditation. That's why in uh, the yoga tradition, how lives one's life is also emphasized. That one should, for instance, speak the truth, tell the truth, don't harm others. If we go on telling lies, those things are going to haunt us when we're trying to calm our minds. There are all these twists and tangles in there because we've been telling lies. So those kind of things. But what I do in the morning, I have a cup of tea in the morning, uh, or two, and read some spiritual text, read some scripture, read something inspiring. Sometimes I go to the near death experience website and read some near death experiences.
Mm.
People who have experienced the divine, left their bodies temporarily in injury or illness, and experienced the divine directly. Very inspiring. And this prepares the mind for meditation. Prayers in our temple, actually, we have silent meditation till the end. Our chanting and prayers are at the end of our meditation, but silently. True. I don't sit. We need to develop our own particular methodology of meditation, our own particular, because each person is unique. Each person will have her own way of meditating. But I will sit down and I first begin with rhythmic breathing and some visualization of perhaps visualizing light filling my body and that kind of thing. And then I may recite a certain prayer internally, very slowly and quietly. I mean, not speaking it, just silently, because we're in the temple. Other monks will be disturbed if I say it out loud. If you're alone, you can say it out loud. But there's something to repeating a prayer silently, and gradually feel the mind going more quietly, coming more to fix on the that aspect of divinity which we meditate on.
Yeah.
And
And I think that morning time is really holy, before it's a great way to start your day, to really prep for the day. And so what I do is same thing. I have a little tea or something just to get the system woken up. But I have that poem that you gave me that you guys do every morning, chant the name of the Lord. And so I say that poem out loud it's only me in the room, so it's okay. But I have my altar and I'm sitting facing east with the altar in front of me. And I've got Ramakrishna's picture there, and I've got Sarvadevananda's picture there, and I've got, I call them my team, Krishna and Ganesh and Shiva and Holy Mother. The team is there, my support system. So I say that prayer, and then I do a little chant. And then I read one chapter from the Gita. I use my own versions of the Gita, one chapter. And then I'm like really ready for japa, which is repeating the name of the Lord. If for any of you haven't heard that term, and you just repeat it 108 times. So if you have a mala, you can count on beads, or you can count on your fingers or whatever. And then that prepares me to go into silence. And then I just stay in silence, probably 20 minutes to half an hour. And then I'm good. Then I feel like, so happy. And the good thing is, it's that kind of deep, content happiness that just, it doesn't wear off. It takes a lot to shake that happiness.
Yes, beautiful. That's you mentioned your altar. That's something that many people find helpful, though some people reject it, of course. But my own experience with an altar was when I first started practicing meditation and devotion and those things. I had built with my own hands a little wooden altar, and I had it in my bedroom long before I joined the monastery. And I had some holy pictures on there. There was a little marble statue of Buddha I'd picked up at a secondhand shop somewhere. There was a picture of Ramakrishna. There was a picture of Jesus. There was a picture of, I don't remember all the little pictures, just a few, just a handful of the holy pictures. And I started bowing down there, just bowing my head to the floor before this little altar and burning a little incense. And now and then I would go out into the yard and pluck a few little flowers that I could find and place those on the altar before the images, the holy images, and feel like I was offering some kind of worship. And one day, it wasn't too long after I had started doing this, I came to my little altar and I bowed down, and I felt something. I felt like this is the holy spot. There's a holiness here. There's a sanctity here. It can't really describe it, except that I felt like the divine is manifesting here in this little altar. Of course, the divine is everywhere. And yet, when we set aside a certain area and treat it as specially holy and invoke the presence of the divine there, divine manifests more palpably there. This is the science of worship, in the sort of the worship of images. From Western tradition, it's especially Protestant, Jewish, Muslim tradition. It's blasphemy to say that God dwells in an image, or God is an image, and that's a kind of misunderstanding of it. It's the image, a holy picture, is a representation of the divine, and yet, because we pay attention there, because we pray there, because we offer flowers there, the divine manifests there more strongly. We can feel it more. So it's a wonderful help to spiritual life, at least for those who are not completely opposed to it.
Right. And I think also just having that energy, that meditative energy in the same place, if you meditate in the same place all the time and always go there, then your meditative energy is there. And some people even have, I have one, I don't use it all the time, but when it's cold, I do. I have a meditation shawl. So I just take that shawl and put it around me. And then when I travel, I bring the shawl with me so that I at least have that. I don't have my altar or anything, but I at least have that. And that kind of holds that energy for me as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I also have Jesus on my altar. And it was very important to me on Christmas Day, to say a special prayer to Jesus and happy birthday and the whole thing to him, And also, this is a little off topic, but Greg and I have been watching a mini series called The Chosen, and it's on YouTube and it's free. And it's about how Jesus got his disciples. And it's interesting to see they were kind of a motley crew. They were very diverse, and they all had faith, and they all had their own kind of spiritual practices that they did. They had their own way of doing things. But what they had in common was, they had a reverence for the Lord, and that brought them all together. It was really, really, you guys might check it out since it's free. There's only 8 episodes, and just look it up on YouTube. So, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that what's interesting also is that it doesn't matter what faith you have. There are, prayer is pretty universal no matter what faith you belong to. And, meditation, however you call it, just being in silence, being with nature is another thing that's really universal. Song, music. I think song stirs the soul and brings in another element of emotion to get you in that that mood of feeling the divine. I think that's, you were talking about that too, when you can feel it and it's not just you're going through the steps by rote.
Right.
Here I am sitting down reading the prayer, blah blah blah. No, it has to mean something to you.
Absolutely. That's so important.
Yeah.
It's will transform our lives when we live it. Really, when we really live it, our lives become transformed. And that's right. Whatever our tradition, maybe making an altar is not for us, but maybe having a sacred corner in our room where we go. That's the idea of a ritual, that we ritualize it so that the mind automatically starts. Oh, I'm sitting in my meditation chair, and I don't use that chair for other things. That chair is my meditation chair. The mind automatically starts feeling like meditating, understands this is the time when I have to be quiet and follow the rules.
Yeah.
So,
It's interesting. I wanted to bring up also because you talked about offerings, and it's almost like God gives so much to us. This is something we're giving to God, but God has everything. What can we give God that God doesn't already have, right? But it's just the feeling. It's more for ourselves, right, than for God. Or how does that work?
for sure. Well, right, from the highest standpoint, everything is part of the divine. So if we pluck some flowers and offer them at the altar, actually, we're only giving to God, as it were, what is already God's. So that's one way of looking at it. But uh, so long as we feel separate, then we are in a sense separate. Then I'm separate from God, so I can offer things to God, and I offer my. It's a representative. When we lay a flower before the altar, it's a representation of laying our heart in God's hands. All right, dedicating our whole life to the divine. Let our whole life be consecrated to the divine. That's really offering a flower is like that. It represents that, consecrating our entire life to finding the divine everywhere, to transforming our lives, and then becoming instruments of the divine. That's one of my favorite prayers. The prayer of Saint Francis, or at least attributed to Saint Francis. Uh, Make me an instrument of thy peace.
Mm.
The divine is infinite peace. How and this world is so unpeaceful. How can we bring peace? We're not going to bring peace by building better weapons. We're going to bring peace as when more and more people find peace here within. So let it start with us. We can be instruments of peace.
Yeah, that's the song in spiritual living, right? Let peace begin with me, and they sing it every week at the end of this service. That
Let there be peace on earth, and let it be
yes, and
with
let it
me.
begin with me.
With me,
Yes,
yes, with me.
yes.
Well, that's where it has to begin.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Okay, so we got your morning routine down. So then during the day, what do you do to ritualize or to, incorporate spiritual practices into your work and everything that you do during the day?
I think it's a gradual shift of our whole outlook, that what I'm doing is also an offering to the divine, or that I am, well, I love Thich Nhat Hanh's first book called Miracle of Mindfulness. and simply the miracle of being fully awake to the present moment. And he used to say, why do you do the do he tells a story of every night they would do the dishes. He was visiting some place and they were doing the dishes. And one day, one of the other devotees there said, I'll do the dishes tonight. And so he asked him, yeah, but do you know how to do the dishes? And he thought, what do you mean how to do? I know how to do the dishes. No, are you doing the dishes to get them done or doing the dishes to do the dishes? If you're doing the dishes to get them done, then as long as you're doing the dishes, you're not really living. You're just waiting to get them done so you can do something else. Do the dishes to do the dishes means you're fully awake to the moment of doing the dishes. And so depending on our outlook, we can look on it as each dish I'm doing, I'm offering to the divine, or keeping a constant remembrance of the divine while washing the dishes, or from the more Buddhist sort of impersonal standpoint, being awake to this very moment. And because in this moment is tremendous peace. In this moment only we can be truly awake and alive and aware of God shining within, actually.
Yeah, or you could be like grateful that you had the food that made the dishes dirty and grateful for the dish. I think
Yes,
when you
yes,
have
yes.
gratitude in your mind, then stress can't be in your mind at the same time. It's just not compatible. So just even having that gratitude process as you're doing the dishes is
Dishes is
one way of.
dishes, dishes is no doubt one of the places where it's really challenging because there's so many of them, and
And they
especially
keep coming.
and they keep coming, and it's like three times. If you eat three times a day, then the three times a day dishes, and gosh, and if you don't work fast, so I think it doesn't mean doing it mindfully doesn't mean that you have to do it really slowly. At the same time, we have to be efficient. Otherwise, we're spending hours in the kitchen just washing dishes. And yet, is that time going to be time lost for our spiritual life? For our life, is it just time that's wasted? Then everything. So we have to find a way to transform that time also. That time of washing dishes.
Yeah.
Mm.
It also
Sometimes I
brings to
think,
mind that brings to mind Brother Lawrence and the practice of the presence of God.
Yes.
What he talks about, that I find God amongst the pots and pans.
Right.
And
Right.
like the idea that like when you're scrubbing them, that you like get the feeling that you're like scrubbing your mind or your heart clean.
Yes. Yes.
And so
beautiful.
Yes.
I just got that book because Sarva Priyananda mentioned it in one of his classes. So I'm like, I'm going to buy that book. So I bought one for me and one for my son, who's a Christian, for Christmas. So we're going to read it together.
oh,
Yeah.
Which translation?
I don't. I
Anyhow,
don't have it in front of me to tell you
does,
which translation. I didn't
doesn't
know
matter.
there was many translations. I just bought it
It's
off
a, it's a,
Amazon.
it's an amazing classic, and one of our swamis, early swamis in this country, used to prescribe it as a standard text. So we also consider it as a kind of standard Vedantic text because he teaches how to maintain the awareness of God. In his case, Jesus all the time. And so he's constantly talking with Jesus, and Jesus is with him. And when he's working in the kitchen, he was given a job in the kitchen, and he didn't. Nobody likes kitchen work, and it was tough, hot. It's the most tense place when you have a big monastery of 50 monks, and lunch has to be served on time, and it was a very stressful job. And yet he found God. He found Jesus in the kitchen. And when he became older, he was given the job of mending shoes. Is there a more lowly job than mending shoes? I don't think there is. It's one of the lowliest of the jobs. And there he was with Jesus mending shoes. And
Oh,
remarkable thing about it is that how much joy it brings. And you see these kind of reading the saints like Brother Lawrence or any of the saints, and you find that note shines through their lives, the joy, love and joy.
So actually reading is a spiritual practice as well, and studying, that's like jnana yoga, the path of knowledge. And that's one way we can incorporate spiritual practices, because what are we eating, not just through our mouth, but what are we eating with our minds and our eyes and our ears? What are we listening to? If we're going to watch a YouTube video, why not watch a spiritual one? If we're going to read a book, why not read a spiritual one? Because it's nourishing us. It's giving us those vitamins that our spiritual practice needs.
Yes, yes. Well, that reading is, of course, there are different kinds of reading. There's devotional reading, and there's also a reading, we can say, and you had suggested we might try that at the end, reading of scripture, and the scriptures being utterances of illumined sages. When we read scripture, we can actually meditate on a passage of scripture, a short passage, and try to experience directly what that passage is describing. So that's right, and that these two main approaches in spiritual life. The one is primarily through love, and the other is primarily through wisdom. And then there are different practices associated. There are four kind of different streams of practice: the practices of love and devotion, the practices of wisdom and self-analysis, and the practices of meditation, and then the practice of transforming our work into spiritual practice. Those are the four kind of streams of practice we have, and the two main attitudes are either of more the wisdom attitude. My true nature is infinite consciousness and bliss, and looking at our inner experience and rejecting all that is not infinite consciousness and bliss. That's, you could say, a path of the approach of wisdom, the impersonal, the divine viewed as the impersonal absolute reality shining behind everything.
Yeah.
And the devotional attitude, which is God is my beloved. And that's for most people that's more appealing, though they're both equally valid approaches.
Yeah, and the path of love, I've talked with a lot of these guys in my previous classes about bhakti.
Mhm.
So Swamiji is talking about the path of bhakti, where we see the divine within everyone we meet, and learning to know that when we love someone, what we love is that divine within the person. And we can love someone as our child, or as our parent, or as our friend, or as our spouse, but all of it is love. And so if we can see God in that same terms of, like, God as a child would be like, imagine the baby Jesus and the love we would feel for a little baby, or God is the Father, or God is Holy Mother, then it's God is loving a God like we would love our parent. And that just makes it more relatable for us, so that it, rather than this infinite being that's, how do you touch, hold, feel it? We're not familiar with that. But when we personalize it with a relationship, then it makes it more real to us. It makes it easier to grasp, I think.
Yeah,
Would you say that?
absolutely. In the path of love, developing a relationship with the divine is essential. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I like my team, I go to them for different things. Ganesh, the remover of obstacles. So if I have a problem, I'm like, Ganesh, where are you? Help me through this, right? So he's always good. Okay, so let's do that Upanishadic meditation. Do you have anything else to say before we get to that? Or does anyone want to share any questions? Pam Gagan has a question.
It's not a question, it's a statement. And that when I was in India, what I learned is the lowliest of the castes system are the crematorium, people, the people that touch the dead bodies. They are the untouchables. And what I learned, though, is they actually are held in the highest regard, because if they did not do that, their whole society would crumble. And when you were talking about, about doing the dishes and how it is a lowly, boring thing, and yet it is so important. And when you put that love in each dish and gratitude for it, it creates that energetic presence when you're eating as well.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Does anyone else have a spiritual practice they want to share, or a question they want to ask of our Swami? Okay, so Swami, do you have any other things to say before we get to the meditation?
I'm reading. There's a quote here from the Practice of the Presence of God, Brother Lawrence. The time of business does not differ with me from the time of prayer, and in the noise and clatter of my kitchen, while several persons are at the same time calling for different things, I possess God in as great tranquility as if I were on my knees.
Oh,
Yeah, that's beautiful.
thank you, Preeti, for posting that. It's beautiful.
I
Swami,
would just like to say, because I don't want to interrupt after the practice either, it's just such a joy to be with you, Yogananda. So the Maya Yogananda, and this has been wonderful, and I just want to be quiet now to hear the end of this all.
Yeah. I'll make sure he comes back. He's a treasure.
Well, let's see what else to talk. I was thinking we could do a short meditation with one of the famous verses of the Upanishad, and probably it will be best if we spend a little time with the verse and think about it, and then we meditate on it. This is, in fact, a traditional way of learning Vedanta. Is first we hear the truth, and then we reflect on it, and we try to firm our conviction in its truth, and then we meditate to manifest that truth. And the Upanishads are the ancient scriptures of India. They are considered to be the not written, but uttered by seers. The term used is actually seers, those who directly perceive the divine. To seeing as in directly perceiving, because we don't see with these physical eyes. It's an inner seeing. It's an inner direct experience, directly experiencing. So they're called seers, the ancient seers who expressed these sacred verses, indicating their realization. And because of that, and because they've been meditated on for hundreds and even for thousands of years, they possess a power to awaken us, to grant us the vision of the ancient seers, to perceive the divine directly. And the verse that I want to take up is the first verse of a very short Upanishad. There's many Upanishads, dozens and dozens of them, but there are about 11 or 12 of them that are considered the main ones that are most often studied. And this is one of those. And it's, I think, is it 24 verses or something? It's the Isha Upanishad. It's called Isha, means because it begins with the word Isha, which means the Lord or God, Isha. And let me just, can I share a screen? Yes, I can share a screen. Let me see if I can find that verse and see if we can.
Oh, there it is.
You see it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the first part is in Sanskrit, and then there's a translation. Translations are never fully satisfactory, but the reason I've written it out in the Sanskrit also is because the ancient language is a holy language, it's a sacred language, and so I want us to chant it together. Though you probably had better keep your microphones muted while we do that, so that we don't have a cacophony. But I'll first chant it once, and then we'll talk about the meaning, and then we'll work on chanting it together also. Om Ishavasyamidam sarvam yatkincha jagatyan jagata tena tyaktena bhunjitha magridha kasya svidhanam. Oh, it's a very short verse and has a lot in it. It begins, of course, with the sacred syllable Om, which is the syllable for God. If there is a word, if there is a name of God that's the most universal in our Vedanta tradition, that covers all the different manifestations of the divine, it would be Om. And that universal reality which covers everything and envelops everything. And then the Upanishad says, Isha Vasyam idam sarvam, all this in this world, everything we see, everything that moves, everything that doesn't move, even everything, Vasyam, here's where the translators have different ideas, is covered by the divine, is enveloped by the divine, is not other than God. So this tremendous assertion that when we see this world as a collection of separate objects and separate beings, we're not seeing correctly. To see it correctly, we need to see it as divine. So this is the very first verse of this, but a very powerful verse. Ishavasya, whatever is in this world is enveloped by God. And it really contains that command, see it as enveloped by God, cover it with the divine. Through our own experience, we need to see it as what it truly is, as divine. And then this second verse, the second half of the verse, tena tyaktena, by that renunciation, enjoy. This is rather mysterious. What does it mean? The real renunciation in this case, what do we need to give up? We need to give up our false idea that this world is a world full of nice objects that can give us pleasure and happiness. They can give us pleasure, but they can't give us true happiness. The idea that this world is a world of things and beings which can satisfy us and give us happiness. That's usually the idea we have about this world, right? We feel pretty good. We're doing fine, but if we had a little more money, we'd be better, right? We'd be happier. If we could get just a little bit of a nicer house, we'd be happier. Actually, we'd be happier if our house was nicer. If we'd be happier if our spouse would just pray a little with us sometimes. He doesn't want to pray with us. He wants to do his own. He wants to watch football while we want to pray, and it would just be better. So the renunciation that this verse is calling for is to give up that false idea of this world and see it for what it truly is, the divine. See that it is enveloped in the divine. And that when we desire for objects, we're actually bringing ourselves misery. So do not covet what belongs to others. Kasyas with dhanam. Sometimes they do not covet. Dhanam, strictly speaking, is wealth. So we don't covet wealth. Or whose is wealth anyway? To whom does all this belong? It's all God's. So can we see it as God's? Yes, that doesn't mean we are to give up all our wealth, our bank, not empty our bank balance, but see ourselves as trustees of wealth. that it's not mine, it belongs to God, and I'm a trustee of it. So I need to spend it wisely. That means I do have certain needs. I have needs for shelter and food and some enjoyment also. But responsibly, I'm going to spend it responsibly. And so this is the kind of basic idea of this verse. Are you getting a sense of it? Any questions or comments about this verse? It's got a kind of two folds to it. It begins with Om, and then this world that we see before us, actually, we are to see it as enveloped by the divine, as reflecting the divine everywhere. Whatever we see, we are seeing the divine and nothing else. And that itself is a kind of renunciation, giving up our old idea of what this world is and understanding it to be divine. And that brings tremendous joy. That brings supreme peace. So giving up our old idea of this world and seeing it as divine brings us tremendous joy and peace. And there's a little reminder, as long as we are craving for material objects, as long as we are craving for wealth, means the just as long as we are seeking money and riches in this world, we're not going to be happy. It's not going to bring us true joy. The true joy is the spiritual wealth, which is seeing this world as the divine. So, uh, shall we try chanting it? I'll chant it one word at a time, and then you repeat. Om
Om
Isha
Isa
Vasyam
Vasyam
Idam
Idam
Sarvam
Sarvam
Yat
Yat
Kincha
Kincha
Jagatyam
Jagatyam
Jagata
Jagata
Tena
Tena
Tyaktena
Jaktena
Bhunjitha
Vita
Ma
Ma
Gridha
Grita
Kasyaswid
Kasyasvi
Dhanam.
Anam
Okay, good. I'm going to chant 2 words at a time, 2 or 3 words, and we'll repeat. Om Ishavasyam
Om Isha
Idam Sarvam
Idam sarvam
Yatkincha
yatkinja
Jagatyam Jagata
jagatyam jagata
Tena Tyaktena
tena tyaktena
Bhunjitha
unjita
Magridha
agrita
Kasyasvidhanam.
kasyasvitanam.
Okay, now I'm going to chant the full first line, and then you repeat the full first line after me, and then the second line. Om Ishavasyamidam sarvam yatkincha jagatyam jagata.
Om Isha Vasyam Idam Sarvam Yatkincha Jagatyam Jagata
Tena tyaktena bhunjitha magridha kasyasvidhanam.
Tena Jaktena Bunjita Makrita Kasya Vidanam.
Good, very good. So now let's take 5 minutes, shall we? I'm going to put on have a look at the clock so I know how I won't keep you too long. and um, but I think 5 minutes we can do 5 minutes. I'm going to uh, let's chant it together now, and then we'll have a 5 minute silent meditation, and then we can touch base after that. So we'll chant this together as best we can. Om Ishavasyamidam sarvam yatkincha jagat yan jagata tena tyaktena bhunji thamagridha kasya svidhanam. Om. Know that all this, whatever moves in this moving world, is enveloped by God. Therefore, find your enjoyment in renunciation. Do not covet what belongs to others. So we might repeat silently some of the words of this verse, or hold on to the idea that we are seeing the divine everywhere. In silence, holding on to that. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace.
That was beautiful.
I thank you for joining me in that. Even though we're um, not in our physical presence, but by meditating together, I really felt like we are meditating together. So thank you for joining me in that.
Absolutely. That was beautiful. Thank you so much for leading us and for all your wisdom.
Thank you for thank you for inviting me and for uh, sharing this space with me. And
Yeah. We will have you back again.
We'll meet again.
2021.
2021, and I hope it won't be too long before we can actually meet in person.
Yeah, that would be so beautiful.
Wonderful.
Okay, well, everyone have a wonderful day. And let me remind you that Pam's Church, the Center for Spiritual Living, will be on Facebook Live. And I'm the guest speaker today. So you can tune in at, what time? Church is at noon? Yeah, Pamela Bailey says, yes, she's one of our practitioners. So noon, you can hop on either the Center for Spiritual Living Pleasant Valley Facebook page, or is it YouTube too? Or is YouTube later? YouTube. I don't know, just go to the Facebook page and we'll be.
Yeah, YouTube is later. It's Facebook Live at noon today.
Facebook Live. And our topic is reviving the golden rule. I got some really cool golden rules from various religions and stuff. So I hope you guys join us. And thank you, Swamiji. We love you so much, and we're so grateful for your wisdom. We'll see you next time.
See you.
Thank you so much, everybody, for being here.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
So beautiful. Thank you, Lisa.
Oh, thank you very much.